What up, friends? This is in fact the greatest Jubilee, and today we're going to be reviewing Japanese Breakfast's latest album, Jubilee. Japanese Breakfast is a indie rock and pop band headed by Korean-American singer Michelle Zauner. Now, before hearing this record, I honestly didn't have much experience with the band. I do know that they were more dream pop and shoegazy in the past, so this was a pretty stark change in sound. However, I was pleasantly surprised by what I heard here. Jubilee is not necessarily super groundbreaking, although it knows what it wants to be and it does it pretty well. Paprika is a strong opener with dreamlike synths and her light vocals sort of fluttering around these fuzzy drums. Michelle's cadence has the energy to match, appearing very wistful in the refrain as the horns just kind of blare in. It has a sort of enlightened energy to it, however, that also comes in the realization that maybe Michelle isn't reaching people in a way that she would like. Apparently this song was inspired by Satoshi Kon's film Paprika, which is actually my favorite film of all time, so I might be a bit biased towards this track. Now we go a bit more indie, a bit more 80s with Be Sweet. It's a bass-driven, groovy banger with a fun support synth. Her vocals have a bounce to them that keeps the energy up, and the entire instrumental has a sort of synth-pop vibe that an artist like Laro might be at home with. The chorus is really sweet, fitting to the track's name, and I really like those twinkling effects that are added on the instrumental overall here. It's sort of your standard love song, but hey, you need those sometimes, and that was kind of the entire purpose and point of all of the songs of the decade where this is taking inspiration from, so I think it's fitting. Kokomo, Indiana is a lazy day ballad that is probably the closest you'll get to their shoegaze roots on this record. Those strings are an elegant touch, and they fit this sort of sense of familiarity that you get with this track. Michelle's vocals effortlessly glide over this beat, and those small moments of guitar that you get really add to the overall atmosphere. It has a longing aspect to it, seemingly looking back at all the times that she shared with a partner, but this is post-breakup. I feel like the line, watching you show off to the world the parts I fell so hard for, encapsulates the poetic nature of Michelle's lyrics, and I can see why a lot of people like them. Slide Tackle is a decent example at the album at its more bland moments. The song isn't bad, and Michelle's vocals are pretty good. However, the instrumental overall is a little too vibey without having the intricacies that make a vibey song actually interesting. I do really love that sax solo though, and the general mood of the track is pretty well established. I just wish there was a bit more going on here. Maybe a few more drums that are thrown in, or a sort of synth that flows throughout the track that also gets a solo by the end. It's just something to break up the pace a little bit more. Posing in Bondage is similar to the last track, where it doesn't do anything particularly bad, it just sort of exists. I can appreciate its dedication to its darker sound with the droning guitar and the more mechanical beat, but it just kind of stays the same throughout a lot of its runtime. I do enjoy those sort of wind chime synths that arrive during the halfway mark, and the added dynamic of the male and female vocals was a pretty good touch. I just wish it was a bit more interesting overall, and I do wish it kind of showed off their vocals more, made them a bit more engaging. Savage Good Boy, on the other hand, is definitely an interesting one. That initial piano key is a great segue, and the general instrumentation with the piano and the synth flourishes with a big bass presence, that's fantastic. The vocals really shine here, and I think this track has a really good balance of the simplicity and also the lush sounds that are present throughout this entire album. I also really love the way that they pull that instrumental before the last chorus. The lyrics are also really interesting, exploring how we view wealth as security and how we'll use any justification, any excuse for people who have way more than they'll ever need. It was a pretty thoughtful decision to apply that lyrical angle to a quote-unquote love song, of all things. In Hell is a dark touch on their more dreamy sound with nihilistic yet strangely relatable lyrics like, "With my luck you'll be dead within the year, I've come to expect it, and hell is finding someone to love." I love how the guitar picks up during the second verse, and the general pacing of this track is really nice. The instrumentals just sort of pile up until we get that sweet sax solo near the end. It is a shorter track, but it does use its time pretty wisely. Weirdly enough, I can also totally see a band like We Are Scientists making a track like this, with the sort of crude and blunt upfront lyrics about love and things like that. As a closing track, I think Posing for Cars does a great job at summing up this album's humanity. It's a pretty down-to-earth and grounded record, and these sort of slice-of-life moments like funny photo poses and just exploring how people relate to you, like, that's what makes for a memorable experience, man. The simple acoustic intro captures these homely elements pretty nicely, and I think that extended guitar solo until the end, it, weirdly enough, sort of fits the ups and downs of a relationship. It shows a feeling of relief in finding the right person or just finding yourself, so I think that was a pretty cool moment to end the album on. Jubilee is an album that I think shows how Japanese Breakfast can break out of their tried and true sound without giving it up completely. While I wasn't that familiar with their old stuff, their foray into 80s indie and pop was an endearing and down-to-earth ride. I do wish they got a bit more experimental though, and some tracks were just too vibey for their own good, especially when you compare them to the lush instrumentals on songs like Be Sweet or even Savage Good Boy. It is a solid project though, and I just hope they continue to weave their sound into newer and more exciting genres. I'm feeling a strong 7 on Jubilee by Japanese Breakfast. Now, of course, we do have to talk about the album cover on this show, and this is a pretty good one overall. I really like those warmer tones that are present throughout pretty much every element on this cover, and I think it also kind of captures into the narrative on the last song of the record with how they experiment with funny photos and poses and things like that, trying to make something look cool even if it's like kind of lame but in an endearing way. But I think the design overall on this cover was really good, and it expresses the homely nature of the themes of the record pretty nicely. Of course, those were just my thoughts on the album. What did you guys think? Did you like Japanese Breakfast's foray into this sort of 80s aesthetic, or are you more keen on their older sound? Be sure to let me know. Like, comment, and subscribe. I forgot to do that for the last 2 videos because I'm not used to saying it. But do it this time to make me happy. And until the next one, farewell.